Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews has been cleared over his alleged facilitation of the Labor Party's Red Shirts rorts. That's according to a report released today by the state's Ombudsman. The Ombudsman, Deborah Glass, says she found no evidence to substantiate Adam Somyurek's claims implicating Mr Andrews as the scheme's coordinator. She says while she cannot rule out other evidence coming to light, it is now time to end the debate.
Not only was it not criminal, but it wasn't even a contempt of Parliament. Now, I think people see these kinds of things and they go, well, what happens when MPs cross the line? Nothing seems to happen. And that creates, I think that really undermines public confidence in our members of Parliament and fundamentally in our democracy.
Ms Glass has also criticised Victoria Police over its handling of the investigation, saying it should apologise to the 17 former Labor members who were arrested in the sensationalised pre-dawn raids of 2018. Victorian Police have since released a statement saying while it respected the Ombudsman's decision, it would not apologise for making the arrests. And our Melbourne political reporter, Simon Love, is joined live now by the Victorian Ombudsman, Deborah Glass. Simon?
Thanks, Ash. Ombudsman Deborah Glass, thank you for joining Sky News.
Good afternoon.
So Victoria Police has refused to apologise after you called on them to apologise following their arrest of 17 Labor officials in the Red Shirts rorts affair. What's your response to Victoria Police?
I'm not surprised. I don't have jurisdiction over Victoria Police. I do need to make clear. But I have some experience of dealing with police in another place, and I do find that police have trouble generally apologising for things, so this seems quite familiar.
Ultimately, does your report exonerate the Premier and his involvement in the Red Shirts rorts affair?
I followed the evidence in the Red Shirts affair, and there is no evidence implicating the Premier in it.
But was he aware of it?
He acknowledges he was aware of the Red Shirts scheme in the broad sense. What he says he was not aware of, and there is no evidence that he was, is of what I describe as the artifice, the way in which the scheme was constructed using public funds, and that's what I described as wrong.
How could the public have confidence in their politicians following your findings, I guess, into this Red Shirts affair, and particularly in the misconduct and the branch stacking allegations that we heard from both you and the IBAC Commissioner, Robert Redlich, last week?
I think what this exposes is the really sad lack of a robust ethical framework within our Parliament. Because what we need is a framework that covers the whole range of misconduct. And what people see, and I really understand why people are frustrated by this, they see me say that something is wrong, that people breach the members' guide, and they see that nothing happens. But I never concluded it was criminal.
Why not?
Because it requires an intent to deceive. And the police ultimately came to the same conclusion, as did the Director of Public Prosecutions.
But what about the former Labor Treasurer, John Lenders? Did he have an intent to deceive? Well, again, did you find that at all?
This is the conclusion that all those who looked at this came to, was that there was no intent to deceive. So it was wrong, it was unethical, but it didn't cross that line into criminality. And for me, the problem is not so much the criminal threshold is high, it needs to be high. But the fact that there are no consequences short of criminality when people cross the line, that to me is what illustrates the problem of integrity in our Parliament.
Do you have confidence in the Victorian Parliament to clean up its act and the MPs that were implicated in this, and also the branch stacking report last week?
I think time will tell. I mean, I would like to think that most members of Parliament genuinely have the public interest at heart, whatever side of the political spectrum they're on. But this is how they will prove it. They will prove it by supporting these reforms. This isn't just a matter of the government making the announcement they made last week saying they were going to accept them. This is about everybody acknowledging that parliamentary integrity is fundamentally a parliamentary problem and can only be addressed by Parliament across the board, not just by one party.
And it's not just in Victoria too. Do you think there are lessons out of these two reports around the country for, powers to the Commonwealth Ombudsman, maybe even the calls for a federal ICAC? What would be your message on that?
Well, I don't, I can't comment on the systems elsewhere. I haven't studied them well enough in detail. But what I can say is that Victoria was lagging behind much of the rest of Australia in its integrity framework, and if they adopt what we have proposed, that would make Victoria a leader. And that could set some really important models, I think, for parliaments elsewhere around Australia, and indeed at federal level.
Why has it taken so much time for Victoria to act, or at least the integrity agencies to act on these sorts of allegations?
Well, that's a really good question that I think you could put to the members of parliament who did nothing about it after, or not enough.
Does that include the Premier, though, that he didn't do nothing about it as well?
Well, what I said last week in the Operation Watts report was that the response to my Red Shirts report in 2018 was tepid. Now, yes, they did something, but they didn't do enough. And what they didn't do enough of was create consequences for members of parliament who misuse public funds.
So do you treat this as case closed for the Red Shirts rorts now?
Well, the case closed in relation to Red Shirts, not case closed in relation to parliamentary reform, because I'll be monitoring that.
How will you monitor that?
As I monitor all of my recommendations, very publicly.
So you'll keep a close eye on the politicians in Victoria.
Well,
I mean, we're only 4 months away from an election. What can we expect from your office soon? You're looking into the politicisation of the public service. Can we expect a result on that before the election?
No. That's the other half of the referral I received in February. We've been calling for submissions from the public on that, and our submissions line has actually been open for several months. It only closes at the end of this week. So you'll appreciate that is a significant investigation, and it won't be finished before the election. All I could really put forward on that is that it'll be sometime next year.
Deborah Glass, thank you for joining Sky News.
My pleasure.